In the city's most celebrated dining room, the clinking of crystal fell silent. Because when tech titan Julian Croft walked in, fear was the only thing on the menu. Until tonight, the Aria Grand wasn't just a restaurant. It was a sanctuary of hushed elegance. Hand-blown glass chandeliers dripped light onto tables draped in heavy linen, each one a private island in a sea of plush, charcoal gray carpet. The air smelled of old money, fresh rosemary, and unspoken rules. The most important rule was simple. You do not displease Mr. Julian Croft. When he entered, a chill followed him, cutting through the warm ambience like a shard of ice. At 52, Croft wasn't just wealthy. He was a predator in the world of venture capital, known for hostile takeovers that left founders with nothing but ashes. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit that seemed woven from shadows, accented by a single, piercing sapphire blue tie. His face was a mask of cold indifference, his eyes scanning the room, not for beauty, but for flaws. At a service station near the kitchen, Marco, a waiter with kind eyes and a perpetually worried expression, leaned toward the new waitress. "That's him," he whispered, his voice barely a breath. "Mr. Croft, whatever you do, don't make eye contact unless he speaks to you. Don't ask questions. And for God's sake, remember how he likes his steak." He made a girl quit in tears last month because it was 2 degrees past medium rare. The new waitress, Maya, listened, her expression unreadable. At 30, she was a proud black woman who carried herself with a quiet strength that life had forced her to build. Her cream-colored silk blouse was tucked perfectly into immaculate black trousers, her posture as straight and unyielding as a steel rod. It was her first night at the Aria Grand, but it was far from her first rodeo. She offered Marco a tight, reassuring smile. "I've juggled 3 jobs while nursing my mother through chemo. I think I can handle a man who's picky about his dinner." But Marco's eyes held a fear that went beyond a difficult customer. It was the fear of a man who knew he could be erased with a single phone call. When it was her turn, Maya approached Croft's table. He didn't look up from his phone, where he was gutting some new startup with a few curt swipes of his thumb. "The dry-aged ribeye," he muttered, the words clipped and devoid of courtesy. "Medium rare. And if it arrives even a second past its prime, I'll have your manager's job. Is that clear?" "Perfectly, sir," Maya replied, her voice smooth and professional. That made him look up. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, narrowed on her face. A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, crossed his features. "New?" "Yes, sir. My first night." He made a small, contemptuous sound, a click of his tongue against his teeth. "Oomph. Your kind doesn't last long here." The insult, subtle and venomous, hung in the air between them. "Your kind." The words were meant to shrink her, to put her in a box labeled temporary and unworthy. Maya's lips tightened, but she held his gaze. "Excuse me," he scoffed, a cruel smile touching the corners of his mouth. "Don't get emotional. It's just an observation. Now, fetch my wine and don't be slow about it." Maya turned, her fists clenched so tightly at her sides that her knuckles turned white. The click of her heels on the polished marble floor was sharp and defiant as she walked back toward the kitchen. She hadn't said a word. Not yet. The storm was gathering, and she could feel the pressure building behind her eyes. Minutes felt like hours in the suspended silence of the dining room. Maya returned with the wine, a bottle of Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon that cost more than her weekly rent. She presented it with the grace of a seasoned sommelier, her hands steady, her movements fluid. She poured a small amount into his glass for tasting. Croft picked up the glass, swirled it with an air of theatrical boredom, and took a sip. He didn't swallow. Instead, he held the wine in his mouth for a moment before letting it dribble back into the glass with a look of profound disgust. He slammed the stem down on the table, the sharp crack echoing through the room. "Are you incompetent? Or just stupid?" he snarled, his voice a low whip crack that made heads turn at nearby tables. The room, which had been a tapestry of quiet conversations, fell utterly silent. Every diner became an unwilling audience to the unfolding drama. Croft pointed a finger at the bottle. "This is a Napa Cabernet. I asked for the Willamette Valley Pinot Noir. Do you even know the difference? Or do they just hire anyone off the street these days? Maya's composure was a fortress, but she could feel the first cracks appearing. She swallowed hard, her voice remaining even. Sir, with all due respect, you asked for the Pinot Noir, but you pointed directly to this bottle of Cabernet on the menu. I tried to clarify at the time, but you were on your phone. Don't you dare argue with me, he snapped, his voice rising in volume, deliberately drawing more attention. The performance was for the room as much as it was for her. I've owned dogs that had better listening skills than you. At least they knew their place. The insult was so raw, so public, that a wave of discomfort washed over the dining room. Across the way, a young couple celebrating an anniversary froze, their champagne flutes halfway to their lips. An older woman dining alone shook her head slowly, her face etched with disapproval. A man in a business suit instinctively reached for his phone, his thumb hovering over the camera icon. They were all trapped, witnesses to a cruelty they felt powerless to stop. Maya stood motionless, her cheeks burning with a fire that was not shame, but pure, unadulterated rage. She knew what he was doing. He was feeding on her humiliation, drawing power from the silence of the onlookers. She opened her mouth to apologize, to retreat, to do what was expected. But just as she turned to walk away, to fetch the correct bottle and absorb the blow to her dignity, Croft made his final move. With a flick of his wrist, he flung the wine glass. It wasn't aimed at the wall. It was aimed at her. The dark red liquid arced through the air, a violent splash of crimson against the creamy canvas of her silk blouse. The glass itself struck the edge of the table and shattered, sending a shower of crystal fragments onto the floor. Gasps filled the room. A baby at a far table, startled by the noise, began to cry. All motion ceased. Forks hung suspended over plates. Conversations died in throats. Maya just stood there, drenched in expensive wine, the cold liquid seeping through the fabric to her skin. She was breathing through her teeth, each inhale a struggle to keep the inferno inside her from erupting. Julian Croft leaned back in his chair, a smug, triumphant grin spreading across his face. He had won. He had broken her. He waved a dismissive hand at her stained shirt and the glittering shards of glass on the floor. I'll be expecting a full refund for this abysmal service, he announced coldly, his voice carrying across the silent room. And a manager. Now, you're done here. The finality in his tone was absolute. In his world, people like Maya were disposable. They were props in the grand theater of his life, and her scene was over. But Maya didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't run to the kitchen in shame. For a long moment, she simply stared at him, the noise of the room fading into a dull roar in her ears. She saw him not as a powerful millionaire, but as a small, hollow man. And in that moment of clarity, the fear that had paralyzed the entire restaurant shattered within her. Slowly, deliberately, she took a step forward, then another. She stopped just short of his table, planted one hand on her hip, and pointed a single, steady finger at his face. "You're right," she said. Her voice wasn't shout. It was something far more dangerous. It was calm, clear, and loud enough for every single person in the room to hear. "I am done." Croft's smirk faltered, a flicker of confusion in his cold eyes. This was not in a script. "I've spent my entire life cleaning up after men like you," Maya continued, her voice gaining strength with every word. "Men who believe their bank accounts give them a license to spit on human dignity. Men who build their empires on the backs of people they refuse to see." Her eyes swept across the room, meeting the gazes of the other diners, making them participants now, not just spectators. "You think this is about wine? This has never been about the wine." She turned her focus back to Croft, her fingers still aimed at his heart. "You break people because you, Mr. Croft, are broken. You humiliate servers and assistants and janitors to feel powerful for a fleeting moment, because deep down, you know you're a fraud." A collective intake of breath rippled through the audience. Julian Croft's jaw had dropped. His face, usually a mask of arrogant control, was now a canvas of disbelief. All this, Maya said, gesturing to his expensive suit, the opulent room, all it really shows is that you've never earned a single ounce of genuine respect in your life. You've only ever bought fear. She took another step closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet somehow more intense. I'm not afraid of you. I've worked 3 jobs while my peers were in college. I've held my mother's hand while a doctor told us she had 6 months to live. I watched her scrub hospital floors at midnight to pay for my textbooks, and she still came home smiling. And I will be damned. Her voice rose again, filled with the fire of 1,000 swallowed insults. If I let some pathetic suit who throws tantrums over fermented grapes make me feel small. Just then, the manager, Leo, a man whose spine seemed to be made of jelly, rushed in from the kitchen, breathless and pale. Maya, Mr. Croft, what's going on? Croft shot to his feet, his face flushed with fury. This waitress just publicly insulted me. I want her fired. I want her escorted out of this building now. Leo looked torn, his eyes darting frantically between the enraged millionaire and the defiant waitress. Her shirt stained, her hands trembling, but her eyes blazing with a pride that could not be extinguished. I'll go get the owner, he stammered, seeing no other way out. Croft's smug grin returned. Please do, he sneered. I'm sure Mr. Finch will be very interested to hear about this. Maya didn't flinch, because what none of them knew, what Julian Croft couldn't possibly comprehend, was that the owner had already seen everything. Julian Croft folded his arms, victory radiating from him like heat. He was a king in his castle, and the peasant revolt was about to be quashed. You'll be scrubbing sidewalks by morning, girl, he sneered at Maya, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear his parting shot. The dining room held its breath. Every guest was frozen, a tableau of shock, guilt, and a strange, burgeoning admiration for the woman in the wine-stained shirt. A few phones were now openly recording, documenting the moment for posterity. Then, a voice, calm and resonant, cut through the tension from across the room. I think that's quite enough, Julian. Every head turned. Stepping out from a discreet corner booth was a man who commanded attention without raising his voice. He was older, with silver at his temples and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore an impeccably tailored waistcoat and a simple, dark blazer, no tie. His expression was one of profound disappointment, and it carried more weight than all of Croft's blustering rage. His presence silenced the room more effectively than a gunshot. This was Mr. Alistair Finch, the owner of the Aria Grand. Maya's spine, if possible, straightened even further. Leo, the manager, looked like he might faint. Croft's arrogant demeanor evaporated, replaced by a mask of oily charm. Alistair, thank God. Finally, someone with some sense. You need to handle your staff. This one is completely out of control. Alistair Finch walked slowly toward the table. His eyes took in the scene with a practiced, methodical gaze. The shattered glass, the crimson stain on Maya's blouse, the stunned faces of his patrons, and finally, the belligerent posture of Julian Croft. His voice, when he spoke, was dangerously quiet. Mr. Croft, he began, from the moment you walked through that door, I have been watching this entire, sordid affair unfold from my table. Croft's face faltered. The blood began to drain from it. Then you saw how she disrespected me. No, Finch interrupted, his voice firm but still quiet. The word hung in the air, absolute. I saw how you humiliated her. Deliberately, publicly, repeatedly. I saw you attempt to break her spirit, just as you have attempted to break the spirit of nearly every waiter and waitress who has had the misfortune of serving you in this restaurant. Murmurs swept through the room, no longer hushed, but buzzing with validation. Croft blinked, utterly blindsided. Excuse me? I have tolerated your behavior for far too long. Julian, Finch continued, his gaze unwavering. I've tolerated it because of your money, your influence, your name on buildings. I made excuses. I told myself it was the cost of doing business at this level. I was wrong. He paused, letting the weight of his confession settle. Tonight, you reminded me of what this place is supposed to be about, and what it has become. He turned his back on Croft, and addressed the entire restaurant. I started this place with my grandmother's recipes and a small loan from a banker who believed in me. It was meant to be a sanctuary of warmth and artistry, a place to celebrate life. It was never intended to become a playground for bullies who use their wealth as a weapon against the very people who serve them. The raw honesty in his voice was captivating. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a man defending the soul of his creation. He then turned to Maya, and for the first time that night, a look of genuine respect softened his features. "You, on the other hand," he said, his voice filled with admiration, spoke with the kind of truth and dignity this establishment has been sorely lacking for years. Maya's breath hitched in her throat. Julian Croft's fists were clenched at his sides, his face a mottled mask of rage and disbelief. "You're siding with her?" he sputtered. "A nobody waitress who publicly insulted one of your most loyal customers?" Alastair Finch's expression hardened. "No, Julian, I'm siding with dignity. Something you clearly know nothing about." The judgment was delivered. The power in the room had not just shifted, it had undergone a tectonic reversal. Finch was no longer just a restaurant owner. He was a judge, and his dining room was his courtroom. He turned to his pale, trembling manager. "Leo," he commanded, his voice ringing with authority. "Effective tomorrow morning, I want you to process Maya's promotion. She is the new floor manager." A collective gasp echoed through the Aria Grande. Leo's eyes widened in shock. Maya felt a jolt, as if struck by lightning. Croft stepped forward, his face contorted. "You're firing me as a client? Over this?" Finch met his gaze without flinching. "I'm not firing you, Julian. I'm banning you. Permanently. You and your patronage are no longer welcome in any of my establishments." "You can't do that," Croft roared, his last vestige of control shattering. "I can," Finch replied calmly. "And I just did. Now, I suggest you leave before you embarrass yourself further." Julian Croft stood there, stunned into silence, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He looked around, seeking an ally, a sympathetic glance, anything. He found nothing. No one stepped in to defend him. Not even the staff, who minutes before would have scrambled to refill his water glass, moved a muscle. They just watched, their faces a mixture of fear, relief, and awe. The silence was his true punishment. Then, something remarkable happened. At a small table near the window, an elderly woman began to clap. It wasn't loud or boisterous. It was a slow, deliberate, respectful applause. Then the couple celebrating their anniversary joined in. Then the man who had been filming on his phone. Within seconds, the entire left side of the room was applauding. It wasn't a thunderous ovation, but a quiet, powerful wave of solidarity. It was real. And Julian Croft, the titan of tech, the man who broke companies and people with equal glee, left without another word. He left without his dessert, without his usual tantrum, without his power. He was simply erased, swallowed by the silence he had so often used as a weapon. An hour later, Maya stood in the back office. She was wearing a clean, dry shirt provided by the restaurant, her wine-stained apron folded neatly on the corner of Alastair Finch's mahogany desk. He slid a folder across the polished surface toward her. The label read, "Management Protocols." "I know you didn't come here tonight looking for a fight," Finch said gently. She shook her head, a shaky exhale escaping her lips. "No, sir, but I wasn't about to let a man throw wine on me and walk away smiling, thinking he'd won." A warm, genuine smile spread across Finch's face. "That, Maya, is precisely why you're staying." She hesitated, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. "Are you sure about this? The promotion?" He gestured toward the dining room, where the energy had completely transformed. Laughter could be heard from the kitchen. The staff moved with a new lightness, their shoulders relaxed. "You did more than stand up for yourself tonight," he said. "You gave every single person in this place permission to breathe again. You stood up for everyone who has ever swallowed their pride because they thought they had to. That's not the act of a waitress. That's the act of a leader." Maya looked down at her hands, then back up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. It was all she could say. By the next morning, the ripple had become a tidal wave. The video, filmed by the diner on his phone, had been posted with a simple, powerful caption. She finally said what we were all thinking. It exploded. The clip of Maya, soaked in red wine, but standing tall, her voice cutting through the silence as she dismantled Julian Croft's cruelty, racked up over 2 million views in the first 24 hours. It was shared, stitched, and remixed across every platform. The comments section became a global town square for a debate on wealth, power, and basic human decency. She is a hero. That man is everything wrong with the world. Why do rich people think they own decency? Bravo to her for taking it back. That owner, Mr. Finch, is a class act. That is how you run a business. #respect. She better be running that entire restaurant by next week. Queen Energy. News stations called. Talk shows wanted interviews. Maya politely declined them all. She hadn't done it for fame. And Julian Croft? The silence that had defeated him in a restaurant followed him into the world. Within a week, 2 of his firm's largest institutional investors publicly announced they were severing ties, citing concerns about corporate culture and significant reputational risk. His name, once a symbol of ruthless success, became a warning. A meme. A cautionary tale about the high cost of low character. Back at the Aria Grande, everything had changed, yet it felt more like itself than ever before. The oppressive tension was gone, replaced by a light, collaborative energy. Laughter echoed from the kitchen again. The staff stood straighter, their smiles genuine. And near the front desk, where the maitre d' greeted guests, a small, elegant gold plaque had been installed. It read, "Respect is the dress code." Maya Coleman, manager. Maya didn't become a millionaire. She didn't write a best-selling book or start a movement, but she earned something far more valuable: freedom. The freedom from silence. The freedom from shame. The freedom to stand up, not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been made to feel small, invisible, or afraid to speak. And the city, watching from behind its screens, finally learned a lesson that night. It learned that true courage isn't always about yelling back the loudest. Sometimes, courage is just refusing to bow. If you're moved by this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more emotional, dramatic, and unexpected tales. Let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. We love hearing from all of you. When you comment, please remember to comment with respect. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and keep standing tall.